Bills Mafia, what's going on? Welcome to your Thursday, October 10th edition of the First and Five podcast. I am your host, Dave Myers. You can follow me if you want to on X at Dave Myers BIB. I have a really special guest, a guy that I've been trying to get to do something with me. And of course, he's busy. I'm busy. We got a lot of stuff going on. One of the hosts of the Buffalo Plus podcast. If you guys, first and foremost, if you're not watching Buffalo Plus, I don't know what you're doing with YouTube because that's my go-to stuff. They do great content over there, so go check that out when you guys are done here. Dan Fetes, how you doing, brother?
Good, man. It has. I was just telling Jenna, I'm going on to do Built in Buffalo, and we've been trying to do this now for a couple months now, so I'm really happy to finally be on, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I know you got a slam pack schedule. It's Thursday. I know all the Bills stuff is hot and heavy right now, and you got a lot of stuff on your slate. So what I want to do today with a sort of condensed version of First and Five, and me and Dan talked about this before, I want to hit on 5 key topics that I think are really important heading into this Week 6 matchup against the New York Jets. And I think, this is a game where I don't know how you feel, Dan, but before we get into the topics, I feel like this is a must-win game for the Bills. I feel like you get to 2 wins and you get to 2-0 in the division. You kind of put a stranglehold on it because I don't know what the Dolphins are going to be doing the rest of the season. And I know we all know, and we'll get into it here in a minute, with the kind of dumpster fire that is the New York Jets and has been for at least the last 25 years. I feel like coming off of 2 bad losses, Josh Allen's never lost 3 games in a row in his career. I just feel like kind of righting the ship, this seems like the perfect opportunity to do that. This long 3-game road trip has been nothing but nightmares so far for the first 2 games. I think if it's not a must win, maybe we could title it as a get right game. How do you feel overall with the aura of this game?
Yeah, must win's tough. And the players we've been talking about it too. Like if they had lost the first 2 games and had won 3 in a row, everybody would feel differently. It's because you've lost 2 in a row, because you've looked so poor in those 2 losses that, the urgency button has come out. And so if the Bills happen to lose, whether, I know we're going to get in injuries, but who plays and who doesn't play, I just want it to look better. That's kind of where I'm at with this defense. I still have confidence. It's crazy. Like the Baltimore game, I thought the Ravens, that's what they do. They win primetime home games in Baltimore. Like that's just what they do. They're now 21-3 in their last 24. And they were missing their 3 best players on defense. And we saw last week, wasn't good in the first half, but this defense still made plays. And so I still feel very okay about the defense. I still have faith in Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich and their play calling. I would like to see some answers to questions that defenses are posing to them that have seemingly confused them the last 2 weeks. That's what I loved so much about Joe Brady the first 3 weeks, was that Josh seemed to have the answers before the ball was snapped. And I think they've gotten away from some of that. I thought Joe Brady, for the longest time, I was very confident in the fact that he kept it simple. And I meant that in the sense of, we're going to run a play. You're not going to stop it. We're going to run it again. And we're going to run it again. And I'll tell you what the play is. It doesn't matter. You're not going to stop it. I feel like we've gotten away from that. Part of that is injuries. Part of that is defenses making adjustments. I now want to see the offense, that cat and mouse game. I always make baseball analogies like, okay, the pitcher now knows what this hitter does best. Well, the hitter now has to adjust. So I want to see some adjustments and see some continuity that we haven't seen the last 2 weeks on offense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we were going to talk a little bit about Joe Brady and the play calling. I think that's kind of been beat to death out here on social media and all across the content creating world. But to me, the biggest thing, like you said, is I want to see things, give me high percentage plays, things that that are going to work, whether it's in the run game, which I know you love so much. Whether it's in the run game or, which we'll get into with injuries now with James Cook popping up on there with the toe injury, but give Josh the easy stuff. And I understand the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans play a different style of defense. And there was 3 weeks of, hey, Josh Allen's just going to take the underneath stuff. This is something new that Josh Allen doesn't usually do. He wants to throw deep. He wants to do this. But to me, I just want to see them try and Joe Brady try. And that's why I kind of labeled it as a get right game.
Yeah.
I want to just see them do things that were working for 3 weeks, no matter what the defense look is going to give you. Josh Allen is that the IQ is just too high, and he's too good of a quarterback to not understand that he can't be slinging the ball 60 yards downfield to Mac Hollins. There's no universe where that's going to go well for the Bills. So hopefully with and we'll get into injuries. Hopefully, with who they're going to be able to roll out there, they can use them to their strengths, maybe some 12 personnel, stuff like that, and we'll kind of see. But before we get into the actual game itself, obviously, unless you've been living under a rock for the past couple of days, Robert Saleh was dismissed, we'll say, as the New York Jets head coach. Kind of a weird time since their owner has never fired anybody in season before, and it's the first time. So what was your first initial reaction, knowing not just because it's the New York Jets, not just because they're in the division, but because the Bills are going to play the New York Jets
Yeah.
week? What was your initial thoughts?
Definitely surprised because he came back from London and did their media on Monday. Like usually if you're going to fire a coach, it's right after the game. You have your discussion. You say you're parting ways. It's what happened with Rex Ryan and other guys too. Like, it's just like, it's over. So the fact that he made it to Tuesday, I thought meant that he's going to be the coach. Look, New York is a media circus to begin with. You bring in Aaron Rodgers. We don't have enough time in the day to talk about all that he does to bring more attention on the team, things like that. So I think that locker room seems very uneasy. They just don't seem to really know who they are. They've been this team that has been so great defensively, but so poor offensively with their quarterbacks and things like that. So they thought you bring in Rodgers and you'll make everything better. And I feel like it's been at times way more of a headache than anything, going back to, oh, I'm going to come back from this Achilles tear, no problem. And you dangle that carrot over the Jets fans and over the media, like I'm listening to dolphin sounds to help me heal. Like it just kind of chaos. And I don't think Robert Saleh did a really good job at handling that, whether it was the cadence talk earlier in the year or things like that, whether it was the unexcused absences. And we've seen plenty of coaches kind of put their foot in their mouth. I don't think Saleh did a good job of putting out any of these small fires. And ultimately, I think that leads to him being fired.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just you're resting on the fact that you think that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back, and then I mean we even saw from Quentin Williams, after last week's game said, hey, there needs to be some accountability. If that's not a direct shot at your head coach, I don't know what is. And he's a defensive guy, and their defense has been well. So I'm not sure if I buy into the whole we get up for our interim head coach one game thing. Like I don't buy into that, because if I'm Sean McDermott, I'm licking my chops right now, because and we're going to get into some other stuff that went down with the Jets today. They had a couple press conferences. If I'm Sean McDermott, I'm licking my chops thinking this team is in disarray. We need to strike while the iron is hot. We need to put our foot on their throats, and we need to just play our style of football. Do you think that's going through the coaching staff's mind, the players' mind on the Bills side of it? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we asked a couple of the players about it yesterday, and just the fact of they understand that, there's a boost. They're not going to just roll over. Spencer Brown said they got 12 more games left. They're not just going to punt on the rest of the season. Like this will give a little bit of a boost. It just naturally does. And they dealt with this last year with the Chargers. They fired their coach before they went out there to LA right before Christmas. And there was a little bit of that bump. You saw their Chargers. I think they jumped out to a 10-0 lead, something like that. And to your point, David, and it's a good one, it seems like a myth that teams that fire their coach all of a sudden get up all of a sudden. Like, I went back and looked at it. Since 2000, 23 coaches have been fired in season. And there's something like, I just looked up for my bets, and it's like those teams the following week are like 15-18 straight up. Like it doesn't automatically mean. Right. Do you want to know why the coaches get fired? Because they're bad teams and the coaches don't play on the field. Like if you're just a poor roster or you're a team that just doesn't have it, firing your coach may provide a little bit, but you're still that team. You didn't change the roster. And so I think there are some flaws with the Jets offensive line that I don't think firing Robert Saleh makes that any better. It's not going to make Aaron Rodgers any younger or repair his Achilles. Like there are still massive flaws on this Jets team that unfortunately it's how the league works. It falls on the head coach and he takes the fall for it.
Yeah. And to your point, like, I don't think having an interim head coach is going to make the 27th against the pass and 27th run or 27th run blocking and 27th pass blocking team. Those guys aren't just going to automatically learn how to block. Like it's just not going to happen. The Jets are a historically bad running team right now. Now, if you want to call scheme into it, fine. They have Nathaniel Hackett, and we'll get into this in a second. They have Nathaniel Hackett, who was calling plays who is one of the worst offensive coordinators in the history of football. I mean, it is what it is. Let's talk about injuries real quick. I don't want to just kind of rush through the whole process. We're here, and we'll talk about the Jets and play calling here in a second. So I got 5 guys that are on the injury report. I know it's Thursday. All right. I'm gonna preface this by saying I'm very patient, and I know that they had a light practice yesterday. I'm gonna be very patient with how this stuff kind of bleeds into the weekend. I got 5 names, and I'm gonna give you all 5, and I want you to tell me which one returning will be more impactful, and then missing would be more impactful. Okay.
Okay.
So we got Taron Johnson, Khalil Shakir, James Cook, Ed Oliver, and Taylor Rapp. Now, I know that Taron Johnson was the red non-contact jersey was off today, and he looked like he was a full go today. So and you can do this in any kind of order that you want. And I don't want to make it too much of a word salad for you, but what? So of those 5 guys, we'll do it this way. Of those 5 guys, which one would play that would make the biggest impact if they played? Which one of those guys?
I think it's Khalil. I think we saw last week the absence of him. And I've been not down on Khalil, but I just want Khalil to be himself and not be forced into a role or talk about him as somebody that he's not. I don't think he's a true number 1 wide receiver. I think he's turned into Josh's safety net. I think he's his go-to guy. I think that's a little bit by default of who's around him. But we saw last week that nobody's winning, nobody's getting separation on the outside, and that's causing more issues for Josh. So if we're talking about offensively, I think the defense is okay. But I think Khalil, bringing him back into the mix against a team that is going to play a lot of man, can he win in those, 2 to 6 yards down the field, I think would be a big boost, not only mentally, but game plan wise for Joe Brady. So I think Khalil's probably the biggest one. James Cook is absolutely a concern. He was on Wednesday. He was just kind of on the exercise bike, not doing much. I think they do need to get back to running the ball more. I just have a little bit of faith in Ty Johnson and in Ray Davis more than I have the guys behind Khalil Shakir, if that makes sense.
That makes 100% sense. And I don't know if you've seen the video going around social media of when James Cook injured his toe, when it was on that play where he went to make that catch along the sideline. He just smashed his toe. And I didn't see it during the broadcast. I didn't see it until yesterday. And it looked painful. It looked a lot more. And kudos to him for, it didn't look like he, laid there on the ground and was like, oh my gosh, I just smashed my toes into the ground. So what's your thoughts on Taron Johnson? Obviously, I think he's coming back sooner than we had anticipated. Do you feel like this is something where the Bills might play him? Because I have the theory that this is a game where they need to just show up the Jets and they need to make sure that they show that the defense is intact. Or is this something where you think maybe give him another week or two because he is kind of coming back a lot sooner than originally anticipated? What's your thoughts on Taron Johnson? We all know how much of a key cog he is on the defense and for everything that he does underneath. But what's your thoughts on Taron?
I think Terrell Bernard is probably the most important player and right behind. And you honestly, you could say Bernard or Taron at this point. And to explain it in a different way by talking about another position, like the safeties have been exposed over the last 2 weeks. And I know it's the talk of, there's no hide and Poyer, but I've been pretty adamant of the safeties are playing a different role than they were in years past. Like Micah and Jordan played a different style of safety. They were underneath and deep. Now with Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin, they play sidelines. They each have half the field. And you're kind of daring teams to throw underneath. And for 3 weeks, it worked really well because you were saying, hey, we got guys like Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams and Taron Johnson. They'll tackle everything and cover everything in the spine of the defense. Right now, the spine of their defense has looked pretty weak, especially against Baltimore when there was no Bernard. But I think Taron will make the safeties better. I think he'll make that interior space of the defense stronger with his tackling ability. And Taron said it was a hairline fracture in his forearm. To me, that almost makes me feel more like it's a pain tolerance. Like if he can go out there, he's said he's comfortable playing with a pad. He played with a club on his hand. I think he said his rookie year. So like none of this seems foreign to him, but just to have him out there covering. Cam Lewis was great the game that he filled in against, the Cardinals, and he had 10 tackles the 1 week. He's still Cam Lewis, and he's still a backup, and Taron Johnson's an all-pro. So I think Taron coming back makes every single person around him better, much like Terrell Bernard did with the linebackers.
So you're not a big fan of seeing Cam Lewis covering Stephon Diggs?
No, not really. Advantage Steph. Advantage Steph.
Yeah, gotcha. Let's talk about Ed Oliver for a second, because I think this is something that could linger. I mean, it kind of came out of nowhere. It was a practice injury with the hamstring. Now, we were talking about how bad the Jets have been able to run the ball this year. Is this something where even if he might be 90%, the Bills keep him out just to get him right for next week because of how bad the Jets, or do you want to see Ed Oliver, if he's healthy enough to go, do you want to see him in the interior of the Bills defensive line?
I'd like to see anybody in the Bills interior defensive line show up and play, frankly, because that's been my biggest concern this year is they haven't been able to stop the run. Even when they were 3-0 going to Baltimore, I said their weakest thing is stopping the run. Miami was gashing them with Achane, and then just Mike McDaniel classic way of just abandoning the run for whatever reason. And it was a blessing that they let Tua throw, and the Bills secondary is a strength. So the hamstring's different. Like I said, to Taron, it doesn't seem like hamstrings can linger. So if you're comfortable with Dwayne Carter and the way that he played last week was a big improvement, I think this thing could linger for a couple of weeks. And the soft tissue worries me with a guy that it's a lot of leaning. It's a lot of, pushing on that. I'd like to see Ed, but if he's 90% or 80%, I'd rather wait to try and get him back to 100%. And like you said, the Jets don't run the ball well. I don't think the Bills stop the run particularly well, but I may just go with the horses that I have than try and limp one out there.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. All right. Have you heard anything other than what I've some whispers I've seen about Taylor Rapp? Is he still in concussion protocol?
Cleared protocol yesterday. So he was back out there at practice. Yeah. So that he should be good to go.
Okay, perfect. Because Cole Bishop, I think he still needs some time to learn. I agree. He's kind of green. All right, let's talk about Jeff Ulbrich and announcing that Todd Downing is going to be calling plays. And if you aren't familiar with Todd Downing, he took over play calling for the Raiders a few years back, 2017, one of the most atrocious offenses I think we've seen in the NFL. But my question to you, Dan, is does this throw any sort of monkey wrench into what Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich want to do on defense? Because he might try to do things that the Bills have not seen the Jets do on tape throughout the season so far. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. And obviously it's that unknown factor and the mystery factor. I still just think it's an Aaron Rodgers offense. I still think Aaron Rodgers is the pseudo offensive coordinator and he's the pseudo play caller, and he's going to tell Todd Downing like what we're running. Like, I just don't think that Todd Downing carries the cachet of now it's my ship, I'm running it. Like Aaron Rodgers is, I just imagine Aaron saying, we're going to run these 35 to 45 plays because I like them the best. So there's enough tape on Rodgers. No, he's a Hall of Famer, and they faced him in Green Bay. They faced him for 4 plays last year. Like I think there is enough of an understanding of what an Aaron Rodgers offense is that I don't think it factors in too much. Of course, I could say that and they come out and do something completely different. I just don't. My money wouldn't be on that happening.
Gotcha. So you think that anything that's on film is probably what's going to be thrown out there? I gotcha. Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. All right. So keys to the game. And we can go how many ever different directions you want to go on this. What are your keys to the game for the Bills offensively to be successful against a really good New York Jets team, a team that whenever the Bills go to play in MetLife Stadium, for whatever reason, it feels like it's a struggle no matter what year it's been. Josh seems to not – he's even called it the House of Horrors.
Yeah.
What seems to be the thing that you think the Bills can get back to, or whatever, however the offense can be put together? We'll talk offense first, and then we can break down into, Josh Allen and stuff like that. But what do you think is your keys to the game? We kind of touched on it earlier with the simple play calling, but what's your thoughts on what keys to the game could help the Bills be successful on Monday night?
It's the two things that I love most. And when Joe Brady's really in his bag, he does it as good as I think anybody in the league. It's play action and it's pre-snap motion. Like we thought that teams would press guys like Keon Coleman, who has shown that he really can't separate yet with physical wide receivers on a consistent basis. And I remember in training camp thinking, well, if you know that, like, can't you scheme up plays like putting Keon? And I know Steve Smith talked about it yesterday somewhere on social media about the fact of putting him in the slot. Like,
Yep.
okay, but you have other guys that also excel in the slot. And I don't really want, Shakir on the outside all that much. So that was part of the roster construction conundrum that you were building. But I want to see that pre-snap motion, because then it's tougher to jam guys. Like, even if it's soft motion, but that for a really good Jets defense that really just wants to play smash mouth football, putting guys in motion. And Josh has always been, historically, he's really good off play action. And if we get back to running the ball, which sometimes is painful for me to say, but if you can do it effectively, which the Bills have done at times this year and under Joe Brady going back to last year, to me, it's running the ball, it's pre-snap motion. Like that game against the Jags, Jenna shot the game on the sideline, so I got to sit in the press box, and I was trying to keep tally of all the plays that had pre-snap motion. And it got to the point where I was like, it's every play. I should stop tallying. I'll tally plays that there isn't pre-snap motion. And I haven't noticed that enough recently. So when you can do that, you free up guys. You're not allowed to jam them. Like, think about what Edelman and Cole Beasley did for years. It's soft motion that allows guys to get better releases because they're not being able to be jammed. So that's my key for me offensively, is to Joe Brady to get back to what has made this team so successful. And they've kind of gotten away from that the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that with the motion too, because after the Jags game, I watched the All 22, and I was having a hard time keeping track of who the hell was going in motion. Like, it was every play, it was a different person. It was Kincaid, it was Samuel, it was Cook, it was Keon. Like, I don't understand the philosophy. I guess if I really rack my brain, I think maybe Joe Brady was trying to do something different against the Ravens and Texans, because they play the one high safety, and they're going to make you try to push things outside. They're not going to let you have anything underneath. I understand that. But to me, I think you can still get guys like Kincaid, and hopefully if Shakir plays, and even Keon, you can do things to give them short routes.
Yep.
And it's like, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's what Tom Brady did for a decade. Like, do things that, like I said earlier, do things that are high percentage. It doesn't put your quarterback in a bad situation. It ultimately opens up your run game. And I'd rather see Josh Allen turn around and hand the ball off 35 times than watch him for the third game in a row run to the sideline and have his head slammed off the ground.
Yep.
Because to me, and I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but I went back and watched the Ravens All 22, and I got to a point when they did the flea flicker, or that trick play, whatever the hell that was. If you watch Josh Allen, his head hit the turf really hard in that game, like almost as hard as it looked against the Texans. So it happens again on Sunday, where obviously he's rolling out and he hits his head and he passes out, whatever. Is there a concern, do you think, and I know I don't want to go too far into this, but is there any concern internally that Josh Allen may not be right the last couple weeks, as far as, I know he was cleared, he went in the blue tent, he said he was cleared. Do you personally have concern, or is there any whispers you're hearing about maybe there's something he's not fully 100% or anything like that?
I don't have any concern about a head injury. I'm not trying to be naive, and I know things get skirted, and we can talk, it's a much bigger rabbit hole about Tua and with the NFL, but I was there in Baltimore when Connor McGovern got cleared, then he went back in the game, and then he got taken back into the tent. So, like, I don't think those independent neurologists are out there just flipping a coin to see if guys have concussions or not. And I know the other conspiracy is the smelling salts, like all that stuff. Like, if you walk on an NFL sideline after a game, there's 55 smelling salts on the, Josh does it before every drive. Like, this is nothing. So I think sometimes a little bit it becomes to people that, I don't want to be disrespectful and say like they don't know what they're talking about. Like, I understand Josh got laid out. Like, I think the one in Baltimore was the ankle. Josh just took a big shot against Houston. I don't have any concerns about a head injury, but I do have concerns about Josh taking a beating, and that goes back to week 1 when the offense was not great in the first half. Josh had to put on his Superman cape in the second half and started hurdling over people, and I'm sitting there, it's like, dude, this is week 1. Like,
Right.
this is playoff Josh, that we're used to seeing go crazy. It's a long season. I'm more concerned about the fact that, he's already had a bruised hand, and the fact that he's taken hits, not as much about his head, but just his entire body of staying on the field. So I know that's a big topic of discussion on social media and things like that. I personally don't think there's much to it. I'm not concerned about a head injury as much as I am just Josh taking a beating in general.
Yeah, I agree. I had PTSD of 2019 when the Bills had the patchwork offensive line, and the offensive line has played good. I'm not going to knock those guys at all. I feel like the offensive line has played good. There's been a lot of times when opposing teams knew the Bills were going to run the ball and they just couldn't stop it. And then there's been times in pass protection, even on this past Sunday, where Josh was just standing there waiting for somebody to get open. And again, that's a rabbit hole that is a whole nother conversation about the skill position players that the Bills have in the wide receiver room and stuff like that. All right, so let's flip to defense. Who do you feel like on the defensive side is going to have a good game, and what do you think the keys are to the Bills being successful stopping the New York Jets offense come Monday night?
Well, it's pressure, and it's pressure with 4, in my opinion, which is nothing new, but we've seen that when I don't know if Greg Rousseau has played the last 3 games. I would love to, I haven't watched the all 22, but like for a guy that, got his 5th year option and is doing all of these things and had the great week 1, like these guys have to make plays. And especially if you're not, like, Greg can help and be a factor in the running game too, and stopping runs and funneling runners to the outside and setting the edge and all these things. I just haven't seen much of it. And that's concerning to me. So we know Aaron Rodgers, I know he ran around a little bit in London, but he got banged up again. Like it's getting pressure because if he sits in the pocket and can throw back shoulder balls all day long, like I think the Bills could be in for a long day. So this is what it always used to be like when they used to face Brady later in his career. It's like, hey, if you can get him off his spot, you got a decent chance. And I always feel comfortable with the Bills corners, and they don't really get burned all that much. I know the Nico Collins touchdown and things like that, but like for the most part, Benford and Douglas, and I tweeted out last week, going back last like 24 games, there's only been 3 wide receivers that have had 100 yards against the Bills. Like if you can make Rodgers uncomfortable, this isn't some new formula. Like, wow, Dan, like you're going really outside the box, but I would just like to see some of these playmakers step up and make plays, because I don't think AJ Epinesa or Greg Rousseau the last few weeks in the absence of Von Miller have really done anything.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that Greg Rousseau is very similar to Gabe Davis? And you're going to look at me and say, what? Gabe Davis made a lot of, I think you know where I'm going with this. Gabe Davis, big game Gabe, right? Mm-hmm. There was a lot of, you look at the stat sheet at the end of the year and you look at Gabe Davis and you're like, that's not bad for a wide receiver too. But then there was a lot of times when, and I don't want to knock on Gabe Davis, but there was a lot of times when you're like, where's Gabe Davis? Where's Gabe Davis? Do you feel like Greg Rousseau is kind of the same thing? Like he has those games when you're like, oh my God, this dude, he can't be stopped. He's stopping the run. He's blocking passes down. He's getting sacks, pressures. And then there's like a 3-game stretch when you're like, where's Greg Rousseau? Like we just gave him his 5th year option and like, what's going on? And I don't want to, it's kind of a weird like something to equate to the other, but is he like a player that just, there's games where he's going to be dialed in? Because we used to say this about Ed Oliver until last year, where there was just games where he was just a wrecking ball. Yeah. And then last year, I think he proved that he was a more consistent player week to week to week. Maybe do you think there's something to that about Greg Rousseau, where he just gets up at moments and then there's times when he's just kind of there? Do you think it's a rotation thing, or what do you think?
Yeah, it's a really good analogy, and I never thought about it, and now I'm never going to look at Greg Rousseau the same way just because of my thoughts my thoughts on Gabe Davis have been for years. And it's, look, if you want to be, the third down guy that comes in, that's great, but that doesn't get you big time second contracts, and that doesn't, equate to all of it. And so I remember I think it was the Baltimore game where I was like, look, if you're not going to get to the quarterback, that's fine, but have an impact another way. Like that's what good players do. Even if Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas aren't picking the ball off, they're affecting the play in other ways that are helping their teammates. And I just haven't seen that a lot for Greg. Like if you're not going to get to the quarterback, then help in the run. And he got pushed around in Baltimore and not really a factor that much in Houston. We saw, it was Dwayne Smoot that had the play. So like, that's a scary good comparison. And I hope that Greg turns that around because I don't want that to stick. I'll be honest, Dave. I like the comparison in a weird way that I don't wish I liked it as much as I did. And I may take that. We got the Buffalo Plus live show today.
You got to give me credit. You just throw my name out there. That's all I ask for. You run with it. All right. I got one more thing because I know you got to run. One more thing, because I don't think we're going to be able to get on probably before the trade deadline. Do you think the Bills are going to make a move? And if so, everybody's talking about receiver. Is there another position that we're not thinking about possibly that the Bills might take a look at? Because you talked about edge and Vaughn's out for more games, safety, stuff like that. Is there another position that you think the Bills might take a look at if it's not wide receiver?
Yeah, I think I'd love to see them make a move for Devontae Adams. I just don't see it. And the salary cap isn't real kind of guy. I think you could make it work. I think he would open up things for other players. I think he would open up things for Dalton Kincaid because we've seen that defenses are kind of honing in on that. And then Dalton's not helping himself. I think he's been one of the most disappointing players on the Bills so far through 5 games this season. So Devontae Adams, for his age and all these things, he's still a gravitational player that opposing defensive coordinators have to go like, oh crap, we got to handle this. Right now, I don't really feel like the Bills offense has anybody that opposing defenses are going, oh crap, we can't let this guy go off. It's just, hey, let's not let Josh Allen be Superman against us and we're probably going to win. And that's what we've seen the last 2 weeks. Defensively, I think they could add some size and some beef to the interior defensive line. Daquan Jones hasn't paid off or looked like the guy that we were hoping he would be when he came back last year. And I know it was a torn pec, and I know that he came back earlier than what he was actually ready, but the team needed him. So he came back because he's a gamer, but he kind of looks a little older and he doesn't seem to be stuffing the run like we thought he would. And that was last year when I was like, hey, like the defensive line is getting kind of gashed, but Daquan isn't there. Like when he comes back, I think he'll sure some things up. I haven't seen that. And Ed next to him, we know Ed's not the bigger guy. I would love to see some size in the interior, somebody that can just be big, like just be 340 pounds and take up space. And I understand those guys don't grow on trees. I just would like to see some more size in the interior. And maybe there's also another option for a third linebacker because they really haven't been able to figure out if they do go to a team like the Ravens. Like, I don't think Morrow's an answer. I think Balen Spector is fine in a pinch, but if you really go into a game late in the season where a team's going to try and run the ball down your throat and you need an extra linebacker, I don't know if the Bills have that. So I like the way that Dorian's played, whether you're banking on Milano coming back. Okay. That would be great. And then Dorian can be the third guy and be the AJ Klein guy that just runs downhill and smashes guys. Cause I love when he does that, but I think you can sure some things up defensively for sure.
All right. Sounds good. I love it. So Dan, before we get out of here, tell everybody that's watching where they can find your content, what you got next going on and what the next couple of weeks looks like for you.
Yeah, Dave, I appreciate it as always. On X at Dan Fetes, and then all of our content with Mike and Jenna and the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. We really appreciate it. Live show today. I'm heading down to New York on Sunday. We'll have coverage from there. Yeah, it just doesn't stop. Mike does a great job getting other reporters to come on, talk about this week. We have Janae Coakley on from SNY talking about the Jets. Tons of good stuff. And then, like I said, Jenna and I or Mike are usually at every single practice. So really appreciate having me come on here because it's been a long time coming, and appreciate your stuff.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. And again, I'll say this in closing. If you guys aren't subscribed to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel, I don't know what's wrong with you. Get out of your mother's basement and go check it out because it's amazing. These guys they got me through a lot of my long drive time this summer. I'll just put it that way. They're a great listen. It's entertaining and it's good stuff. So I appreciate everybody. For Dan Fetes, I'm Dave Myers. hopefully the Bills get a W Monday night. We'll see you guys next time. I'll be back tomorrow. I got Joe Miller from the Overreaction Podcast. So have a good afternoon, guys. Thank you. Take care, and always go Bills.